Hey, welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today I'm talking to Andy Hickman. Andy is the founder of the Art of Workflow, a high-touch coaching practice that empowers married couples, business owners, and entrepreneurs to regenerate their clarity and creativity. Interviewed by David Allen's company for his research on the ancient and medieval connection with getting things done methodology, he's been invited to speak for members of the U.S. Congress, business leaders at organizations like Ernst & Young, and popular podcasts. And he is on a mission to help business owners regenerate their clarity and creativity. Andy, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Raul. I appreciate it, and I'm excited for our combo.
I was interested. You're drinking water. I'm drinking coffee. Is that a brain thing? Are you not drinking anything that stimulates the mind?
Oh, man. No, you see me earlier in the day. I'm down in coffee, but I have been seeing this trend, different social circles. It's like when I grew up, I thought the adult drink was alcohol. This is not me. This is like a meme. And then it's like I got later, like I could drink alcohol, and then I realized the adult drink was coffee.
Huh.
And then I became an adult, and now I realize the adult drink is water. And I think that there is a lot to that, but that's not why I'm drinking water.
Okay, well, I like that backstory to the evolution of what adults drink. But hey, I just want to dive into it actually. So as you and I've had conversations offline, as I've gotten to know your thinking, as I've gotten to see how you articulate and see your work and the results that you get for people, I'm more interested around your unique map of the mind. I know we have neuroscience, I know we have how the mind works, I know all this, but I'd like to get your synthesis, maybe like an overarching framework is what is the unique map of the mind, the way that you see it, the way that you've seen it in actuality, practicing with clients and seeing their results, etc. And I'd like to also get a little bit of backstory of how you arrived to that framework. I know there was tension in your teenage years, and I know that if you can talk a little bit about that just to better understand.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And let's frame it this way in the sense of we want to get this question right. And the question is, what is thinking? We could also say, what is the mind? And for most people, those two things are synonymous. If we get that question right, we have the opportunity of enhancing the way we use those things or engage with those things. And for a business owner, this is what is more valuable to enhance the quality of your thinking, especially if you're doing some sort of creative, open-ended entrepreneurial thing. So it is both what I think thinking is, but more importantly, it is what other people across different cultures and times have thought thinking is.
Okay.
So when anyone who spends some time in the field of productivity, I was just talking to a friend about this. We were going on a walk. You think about habits, okay? And you get into either atomic habits or you get into the power of habit, right? You tend to get like circulated and directed. You look at the citations of these books, they tend to be a interconnected, but somewhat narrow circle. Nothing bad with that. It is true, though, that means we're operating from a particular perspective or lens.
Okay.
My focus is on getting down to what is essential about how all humans think, not just how 21st century humans think.
Okay.
Because if we can get down to that, then we can build up from it a framework for thinking in high definition or high quality. And it's not dependent on a particular profession. So you can switch jobs, you can still use it.
More importantly, principle-based almost, right?
Principle-based. Okay. And when it's principle-based, it can be executed in life, not just in one component or container of your life. Okay. So for me, where this came into play was before I was doing this full time, I was directing a educational startup and was just frying myself to bits. So 70, 80 hours a week, running large in-person physical events. I was emceeing these things. And often these were on weekends. So Sundays away from the family. Not ideal. Okay. but that's what it was. And it was about 3 years of me doing that. There's many different moments where there was realization that this was not sustainable, but we'll just pick one. There was a conversation when finally got the kids down. My wife talks to me, sharing what's going on. It's just too much at the house, and dad's not there. Her husband's not there. And at the time, just didn't know how to engage with that, as many young married people struggle with communication. So I storm out of that conversation. I get defensive. Okay, fine. And I remember going for my front door and seeing one of my kids' strollers there. And I remember taking this stroller, and seemed very uncharacteristic of me. But there was the evidence. I did it. I kicked it and the thing broke. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
whoa. Okay. Yeah. So it was a surprise of a couple different things, a surprise at my own anger. But what was more surprising was the recognition that, yes, I was angry, but ultimately, and yes, I was stressed. Ultimately, I was bored. I
Hmm.
had become apathetic, not because I wasn't doing anything. And for me, this was a clear indicator. It's like, I got to figure this out. Otherwise, my marriage is going to break down and I'm going to break down. Okay. Long story short, I spent about 3 years researching the best thinkers in terms of what does it mean to be organized? What does it mean to be productive? And what are the
Hmm.
current frameworks out there? Now, you mentioned my late teenage years. Backstory here is, and it's a story for another conversation, but late in high school, I went through a neurotic breakdown. And at the time, that's what it was. When I found myself in this situation where it's like, if I don't do something, this is not sustainable, I suddenly realized that experience of mine, that life experience, gifted me with a very detailed map of the inside of the mind. What causes someone to get stuck in a cyclical pattern of thinking? And
Okay.
the flip side of that, what gets you out of that? Okay.
It's pretty powerful, actually.
It's super powerful because when you don't, it's very common to not recognize when you're stuck in it because you're in it.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's actually talk about what does it
Yeah.
look like to get stuck into it, and how do we get out of it?
Yeah. So, where this comes into play is my educational background was in ancient and medieval philosophy. We won't get into it, but I mention that because this is where, for me, I could come and make contact with something, because it was only in marrying the best of modern knowledge and perspective on the mind with an ancient and medieval model or perspective of the mind that I could get something that created results for me and then created results for my clients. So this is where we get into the nuts and bolts. Here's the ultimate reframe for the listener. Thinking is not a mental activity.
Yeah.
Thinking is a personal activity. So just one more time, then we're going to go, what does this practically mean and how does it actually play out? Thinking
Okay.
is not a mental activity. It is a personal activity. What does this mean? Let's use common phrases that we toss around all the time that have clues behind them to peel this back a little bit. Raul, when someone says something to you and you do not understand it, what is one way in which you express that you do not understand it?
But what do you mean? I would say, what do you
And
mean?
good. What's another way to say, what do you mean?
Can you repeat that, please? Or
Because it currently does not
this doesn't make sense.
make sense. Good. Another way to say that is, well, it feels like nonsense.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Sense is the key word here. Our physical senses are perfectly, like, they play a necessary component into thinking. So most people think that thinking is something that just happens up here.
Oh, we use our entire bodies when we think. It's not just mental, is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, 100%. And
Okay.
we are our entire body. So most
Interesting.
people, right? Most people, they're not saying it out loud explicitly, but the way they interact with themselves, their perception of themselves is the voice in their head, because that's what's closest to home. But if we high-fived through virtual Zoom, okay, what did I touch? Did I touch a hand or did I touch Raul?
You were gonna essentially the hand is Raul or it is me, right? So it is the other person. It is the other.
Yeah. And So when we get stuck in a puzzle with business, we are using like 70% of our, you could say, energy and to the thoughts that we currently have here. So if we're just limiting the conversation to our thoughts, what does this mean? You want to get the senses into it, integrate the physical senses
Hmm.
into whatever you're trying to figure out, because only then can you make sense of what you're trying to figure out. So what
Interesting.
is
So
this?
what does that? What
What
does
is
that play out? Yeah, I was going to
right?
ask that.
Exactly. Speaking, writing, hearing, seeing, everything changes when you let whatever's stuck up here come out.
That's why masterminds and peer groups are so powerful, then, right? Because we're having interactions with others to talk about an idea, and we
Yep.
create the entity, the idea that now everyone else perceives and can shape it.
100%.
Okay.
What's a common thing? You work with a lot of people. What's a common thing that people say when they're unclear, they're stressed out? They say, I have so much on my,
My shoulders, or they feel stuck.
yeah. I would say that tends to be someone who's a little bit more in tune with their body, which could be your average client. For me, the common sense is, or the common saying is, there's so much on my mind.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So
Okay.
depending on their language, they reveal what they're using, and then that's where to come in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There's so much on your mind because it's only on your mind. And
So
to
we
the
get it out
extent that,
through speaking, writing, hearing, seeing. So like, how does this work? Maybe like an example is work through this live. Like, what is one of the key? Let's say we're doing a business model design, and right now we're like, okay, well, how do we get from here to there? Like,
yeah.
here's where we're at. We're stuck. We want to get over there because it's gonna make our life better or whatever. How do we take that idea that's conceptually up here and bring it to life?
Yeah. Well, what's the classic thing for one of these brainstorming sessions? If you like look up stock classic scenes in movies or like pictures, it's like,
It's
where
like
are the people
whiteboarding
doing
it.
this work?
Yeah, no,
Whiteboarding,
whiteboard.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. And that feels so good because then all of a sudden, when we get the thoughts out there, we can see our thoughts rather than just feel them.
Okay.
And then we can switch when we can see and it's out there. Cognitively, what's happening is we don't then have to use energy thinking of it.
Because it's off our mind, it's somewhere else.
It's off our mind. So then we have more energy available to think about it rather than to think of it and about it.
Okay.
Okay. So the first step you want to do is you want to, before you write anything out, is recognition. So many people are walking around with, chronically walking around with an overpacked backpack in the head.
Hmm.
And they are feeling the pressure, but there's a big difference between recognizing the pressure and feeling it. So the first step is to recognize that you are clogged,
Okay.
right? Recognize that I have a lot. Okay. After that, it's let me get this out. And a key thing a common mistake that we'll see people do is they think that they have to figure it out in order to let it out. Whereas you want to let it out so that you can figure it out. So this is the brainstorming. This is the jotting down quick thoughts on sticky notes or tossing some stuff on a whiteboard.
Okay.
A couple of things have happened at that point. You just touched your thoughts for the first time and you're seeing your thoughts for the first time.
And this can still be done digitally, like on a digital whiteboard, or
It totally can be done in a digital whiteboard. The medium does matter, but the most important thing that matters is the behavior.
so
Yeah.
you do encourage like physical.
For certain things, what my ultimate recommendation is for task and project management and for time, things are moving so fast and they tend to have a beginning and an end. So it's personal preferences aside, because I will support personal preference. Personal preference aside, I recommend a digital tool for time, project, and action management. But when you get to something like knowledge management, or you get to something like emotional management, my recommendation is to go analog because you have a more rich sensorial experience. You have texture and you're using more motor skills. It's a more dynamic range of motion. When I'm on a computer, there's only a certain number of physical motions I can do. When I'm on paper, there's all these different angles that I can be doing. And that facilitates the sense making.
Okay. So for personal or emotional pieces to get it out, particularly analog, and for things that are projects or due dates or deadlines, then or start end, digital's okay or more effective.
Yeah. But just behavior trumps. Okay. So now we touched the thing, we've seen the thing. Okay. And now there is this angle of it's out. Now is when you want to try to clarify it. We would call this the behavior processing. And what helps with this is to know that every time you want to clarify information, it doesn't have to feel like the first time.
What do you mean?
So
what does that mean?
By that I mean that there are a fixed set of prompts, mental prompts, that move any kind of blob or pressure sensation from something that is foggy and muddy to something that is specific and clear.
So there's like a set stage that the idea has to go through that you're saying you can push it from one stage to the next every time you arrive to that idea to do work on it.
Correct. There is a set stages, and there are set questions that help you get the thing to the stages.
Okay.
Okay. So one of these questions, which may seem quite silly, but often people get in trouble because they don't answer this, is what is this?
Okay.
So it's right in front of the nose. And if you have the experience of every 3 months jumping from one tool to the next tool, hoping that things will feel better once I switch from ClickUp to Monday, the root issue is that's the quality of the information that's the problem, not the container that's holding the information. And most of the times people haven't broken through some of these fundamental levels. So what is this is a core question. Another core question is, we're making a couple assumptions because not everything that's on the mind or on the heart ultimately is something that you want to execute or complete, but a lot of it is. Assuming it's something that you want to execute and complete, the ones and zeros at this point is, what's the next thing to do? What is the next action? And it's important, you're not committing to this next action. Otherwise, you're going to
detailing.
Yeah, you're going to freak out. Yeah, you're just detailing it. And you pretend like someone else is going to have to figure the other part out. But what if someone were to do the next thing, what is it? Okay. Sneak that answer in there. The other one is, if I did that, would I be done? This is coming from David Allen in his book, Getting Things Done. And what this question does a great job of is, some people have different strengths and weaknesses. Some people are the big visionary kinds of, I'm not saying that we should lock ourselves into these modes, because you can get into some trouble if you do that. But some people identify as the big visionary people, okay? But like they struggle with the details. And then other people are like the type A detailing people, but they're struggling with the vision, okay? So what would be the next action helps you get down to the ground level. If I did this, would I be done? Opens you up to the vision side of things, because you can't feel satisfied answering that question until you get to what you're ultimately trying to do.
Okay. So it's the cycle. And then from there, you just arrive to done or completed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So we had recognition, get it out, clarify, and process. Is there another step?
What's next? Yeah. So at that point, you have understanding of what the thing is. So you have this question of, what is this? Now you have a question of, where should it go? And this is ultimately deals with things like, when do I want to be reminded about this? If I'm scheduling a due date, when am I scheduling this due date? When should I next see this? Okay.
So committing to action or committing to something to review it or to take action on it.
Committing to when you will next see it.
Okay.
Because sometimes people get in trouble. They get the stuff so clear, and then they can't resist themselves. They jump right into it, and then they're jumping into too many projects at once. Okay. So, but part of them thinks that they have no other option because they've never mastered a way of organizing actions for the future.
Okay. So that makes
So
a lot
it's
of
now,
sense.
yeah, it's now or never thing, right? Yeah. So these are some of it's too much to get into all of it, but this gives
Yeah.
you a sense of there's fixed prompts that, so when you get to something and you let it out, you don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I'm starting blank canvas again. What am I going to do with this? I don't even know where to start. You just start with these prompts and they go in a particular order. And this facilitates, it acts like a conversational partner, right?
Interesting. But it's
Yeah,
like with yourself or with the
right.
key trend right now is to use like some sort of chat bot or to interact with, but this is more like you're following your own process because it is personal. Like you mentioned earlier, thinking is personal. It's not just an act of the mind.
Thinking is personal, information is a personal reality too, because
Hmm.
it must take form in something in order to be information. And so if just to flirt with the AI thing, then we'll come back in, is yeah, like data can be transformed into a different format. That doesn't mean you have any kind of relationship with it or like you're going to remember it
Okay.
or that you're going to know how to prioritize it, because it at some point it has to go inside you.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Oh,
subject
oh,
for another thing, but
no,
yeah.
yeah, that's definitely a deeper thought. Definitely. But I think driving this back towards the framework that we were discussing, we went through a step by step process of
Yeah.
how we can take one concept or one idea we're chewing through or a goal we're trying to achieve and actually taking workable actions to push this over and actually make progress, even though it's not like it's from start to complete. It's from start to ideation to understanding to clarifying to understanding when we're going to work on it and then to finally through actually seeing it in actuality and in practice.
Yeah, and could I give two examples of this actually playing out with clients that really make it concrete?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and to like paint the theme again, this is a fun quote from a book called The Intellectual Life, which I would recommend. Do you believe that we think with the intelligence only? Are we merely a bundle of faculties among which for this or for that purpose we select the desired instrument? No, we think with our whole being. Knowledge involves everything in us, from the vital principle, so that he means like the intellect there, to the chemical composition of the least cell.
Hmm.
It is not the mind alone that thinks, but the man. So, two client examples. One is there was an engaged couple that went through our mastery program, and I'm working with the bride to be, like we're talking just a few weeks before the
Oh,
actual wedding.
exciting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you can imagine the type of potential stress that she's in. So she comes into this session and is like, you can see it, you can feel it, and it's through Zoom, right? So she's super worked up. She's like, Andy, I just feel super disorganized. I've been using this spreadsheet, but I want to reorganize it because it's not clear right now. Now, fun takeaway number one is nobody has any business organizing something until they are clear about it. Organization is dependent on clarification.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're just shuffling and reshuffling unclear stuff. So I say, okay, we're totally open. If we want to organize this, reorganize it, we can. But first, let's just look at each of these things in your spreadsheet. And if we feel unclear about them, let's figure out how to get clear about them. Okay. And using those same kind of prompts that we were just exploring, and she's not just spinning them in her head, but she's talking about them out loud with me, right? She changes how this information was articulated or formatted in the list. We changed no structural components of it. And within 40 minutes, she feels completely different. And when I say completely different, a complete release of stress 3 weeks before the wedding actually happens. And she
Interesting.
follows up. So this is an example of it's not the tool, It's not the 80% of the time, it's not an organizational issue. It's a matter of the quality of what's in there. And the quality is low if it was birthed only from you spinning your own thoughts in your head.
What do you think about the statement where people say that the next generations are not going to be able to think as critically as previous generations?
I think it's undeniably true. And I think it can be in present tense. They are not thinking as critical. It doesn't mean they can't, but look at what happens. We were right at the pivotal point within you look at the age of the history of work, agricultural age, industrial age, information age, and we're in the information age, sometimes called the digital age. There's two phases for each of these age. One in which like things start to change, and then the second stage is when things like fall into place and kind of find a synchronicity, and then things like ramp up. You talked about the first and the second industrial revolution. Well, we've passed that point in the information age. I would argue it's 2007. This is when the iPhone was first released, when the majority of households in the US switched from dial-up to broadband. So now you got nothing slowing you down. You can actually surf the internet. And this is when MySpace surpassed Google in terms of search results. So you have the introduction of social media, the introduction of smartphones, and you have the introduction of high-speed internet. And if you're born into that and you're essentially strapped at the hip with a thing that can hit you with information faster than you can react, you don't have a lot of space to exercise your own creative faculties. And if creative faculties is a muscle, so if it's not used, it atrophies.
Interesting. So what's your practice to maintain that?
Get back in touch with yourself. And we mean that literally. Get back in touch with yourself, as in write. Don't just feel different things. Like, what are you actually thinking? Have you ever seen your thoughts, or do you just
Actually
feel them?
writing them down, just like a mind dump, just going.
Yeah. This is one of the best things that helped me in the late teenage years, is just simply getting some stuff out. Then you could actually see it, but also exercising your creativity. So whatever, pick a hobby and run for it. But anyway, yes, I do think that the current generation is thinking less critically. And I think that's a mixture of the educational system, the technological environment that we're in, and a whole slew of other things.
It's fascinating. I love the simplicity of the process, or the structure of how to take thought, how to actually think critically around your thought. And like the simplicity of your answers, just get it out there and then view what you think. And I think that's an easy takeaway that we can take, but it could lead to innovation. Even just some of the things that I'm working through, I took notes throughout the entire, pretty much it was like a masterclass here, Andy. But for our listeners out there, where's the best place for people to, one, thank you for being on, and two, learn a little bit more about what you're up to?
Yeah, cool. It's our website, artofworkflow.com. That's the best way to be in touch with what we're doing. A couple things of value for you on that website. One is we've written a story that, in a conversational format, bite-sized, easy to work your way through, and fun, breaks down what are the nuts and bolts of attention, flow, creativity. These do not need to be abstract, highly academic terms. They are simple, in your face, within arm's reach behaviors that anyone can implement, and they're natural. They're innate behaviors. They've just fallen out of atrophy, or fallen into atrophy. So you can read the entirety of that story for free. You can see the whole table of contents, so you know what you're getting involved in. And then also, why do we do that in the email format? Because often you read a good book and you wish you could talk to the author. And so we wanted this book to be delivered in a conversational medium to remove any kind of friction. So right then, when you're working through a chapter, you see something, makes you think of something new, just reply to that email. It goes directly to me, and I'll give you a personal response. We also run workshops, which will get started next week. And any kind of information about the workshops, you would be being in touch with if you're on the email list. So all that comes back to our website, artofworkflow.com.
We'll put those links in the show notes. Andy, thank you for being on, man.
Thanks for having me, Raul. I appreciate what you're doing.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.